Hi everyone, and welcome to Redefining Travel with Singapore Airlines. Today we're going to touch on two major themes, the future of travel and innovation in Singapore and the region. We have with us here a representation from each corner of the startup and tech ecosystem, who will share a little bit about themselves before we start. From the corporate side, Jerome Thill, Vice President of Digital Innovation at Singapore Airlines, who you've heard quite a bit from already, but please, Jerome.
Yeah, so just one word about myself. I spent a bit more than 10 years running my own business. My last business brought me to Singapore. It was a travel meta search. And this was way back. It was back in 2006. And I sold this company to a large GDS called Travelport, a global distribution system, for those who know the travel industry. And I spent a bit more than 10 years with corporate organizations like Singapore Airlines. I worked for Amadeus, I worked for Sabre, and I worked for Travelport, besides doing some consultant engagement, helping startups and investing a bit in startups. So that's a bit about me.
And representing the government, we have Kui Eng Tian, Assistant Managing Director at the Singapore Economic Development Board.
Thank you, Hui. Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. Hello, everyone. It's great to see the room being full. I'm the Assistant Managing Director of EDB, and currently my role involves investment facilitation for all new companies coming into Singapore whose intention is to invest, and also the customer experience and marketing function within EDB. Before this role, actually, I was very involved in working with large corporates to catalyze their open innovation engine in Singapore, working with startups. So I'm very happy to be here. But I thought because the audience has got perhaps foreign visitors and friends, I should do some justice to my organization by just giving a short introduction. So the EDB is a government agency responsible for formulating economic strategies to position Singapore as a global hub for innovation, business, and talent. So we do it specifically through shaping the ecosystem, so industry development, and the activity that we undertake, of course, investment promotion. So that's why we work with a lot of multinationals and increasingly fast growth companies seeking a slice of the Asian market. So the reason why I'm here being a government is because actually in the last few years, we've actually facilitated many companies in the travel tech industry, OTAs, so the likes of Traveloka, Ctrip, HomeAway, Travix, Agoda, I can go on and so forth. And at the same time, I talk about catalyzing big corporates to do innovation because they are lead demand drivers for startups in the travel tech sector. So I was personally involved in some of the projects with Changi Airport Group on their open innovation platform, as well as Singapore Airlines. So thank you.
From the VC side, we have Cindy Teo, Associate Director at Golden Equator Capital.
Hi everyone. I'm a co-fund manager of the venture capital investments at Golden Equator Capital. The group is part of, the company is part of the larger group, Golden Equator Group, which consists of a multifamily office, a membership club with a co-working space, a financial literacy portal, as well as a digital marketing and consulting firm. On the venture capital side, the investments that we do are mainly in Series A and B companies in Southeast Asia, industry agnostic, so travel is a space that we definitely cover.
And we have a startup founder, Maxim Tint from Grip.
Hi, my name is Maxim. I'm co-founder and CEO at Gtrip. So just a little bit of my background. I was in enterprise software, joining a startup as a programmer, and we got acquired by one of the largest telco in Japan in 2010. And after that, I came out to start my own startup, Gtrip. We provide the documentless human travel experience. So we thought that there was a lot of manual paperwork and data entry in the travel experience, especially at the airlines and the hotels. So we built a business to do something like the online check-in using a digital identity. And basically the product today is rolled out as a hotel check-in aviation product. So how it works is that you take a photo of your passport or photo ID, then you take a selfie. We use AI and machine learning to automatically match the face to the photo ID so that your travel experience can be very seamless and digital. So today we have about 10,000 hotel rooms that's using this product regionally, and we raised funding from a telco in 2017, and this year we're going through one more round to do a regional expansion in Asia Pacific.
And my name is Hui. I'm the program head of the Singapore Airlines Accelerator program, which is a joint initiative between NUS Enterprise and Singapore Airlines. So we've all gotten together before this and have had some very lively and entertaining conversations on the themes. Hui, you had some interesting insights about the opportunities that online travel and travel tech could have moving forward. Could you share your thoughts on why travel tech is such an exciting segment, especially in Singapore and this part of the world?
Thanks, yeah. I think without a doubt, the room is full. Obviously, there's a lot of opportunities and people are interested to find out where are the problem statements, where are the innovation opportunities, and where is money to be made. So I think in the travel tech sector, we have to go back to the growth drivers and why we think that is exciting, and particularly in this part of the world. So if you look at what are the drivers, essentially travel is down to wealth and also economic growth, right? So very simply put, if you look at some of the stats that's in front of us, the global middle class, in terms of that in Asia, is going to take up more than 2/3 of that when it comes to 2030. So the growth is really a very young population really in this region. And in a recent report published by Google and Temasek, if you look at the Southeast Asia internet economy, obviously Southeast Asia in itself is already 650 million population. The report states that 74 billion internet economy size in 2018, that is going to grow to 240 billion in 2025, sorry. So, and out of that, there are 4 segments, of which online travel is the second largest, taking up 33%, so growing from it's going to take up 33%, which is going to about 74 billion out of that pie. So, of course, the largest being e-commerce, and after that, online travel, online media, followed by ride-hailing. So, obviously, a lot of opportunities. But let's not forget also, apart from consumer market, what are the trends that are shaping this part of the world? In the past, I think the travel corridor and also is really east and west. But if you look at how the trade in terms of intra-Asia and intra-ASEAN is coming up, really this is really what's shaping the growth trends. And there's another report that talks about the business travel potential in Asia, which is, if I recall the statistics, which is close to 40%, making it the largest business travel market in the world. And actually the trajectory of growth is actually about 10%, double digit or more, compared to US and Europe, which is actually at a low single digit. So I think it's clear why we're all here. But the question is, where do we focus? And also why Singapore has a role to play and role to win, in this whole travel tech. So I think there are a few factors that I'll talk about. We so happen to have a wonderful airport. I'm quite proud of it as a Singaporean. They are one of the best airports in the world, and in fact, they host about 65 million travelers annually. I think you guys must have heard we're building Terminal 5, which is larger capacity than Terminal 1 to 4 combined. And of course, we have one of the best airlines in the world. I think what this speaks to is essentially you have excellent organizations here pushing the boundaries of innovation in the travel tech space. And what does it mean for a small country like us, apart from having demand drivers like them, but also a rich ecosystem of headquarters. I think most of you would know that actually we are a hub for regional headquarters, and that's why a lot of OTAs are here negotiating contracts with airlines, with hotel groups. And it speaks a lot to the density of business decision makers and the ecosystem here.
Thank you, Hui. Maxim, I wanted to ask you, just going off what Hui has said, From a travel tech startup's perspective, what have you seen in the travel tech industry so far that really screams innovation to you?
Well, can I define travel a little bit more than just a traditional travel?
Yes, please do.
I'll start there with the question. So if you talk about travel, Jerome, how much does an airplane cost? Let's say an Airbus.
Oh, the last time I bought one, I don't remember. No, it's probably in the hundred millions.
Okay. So imagine this: if that Airbus was single-use, after you fly from Singapore to San Francisco one time, you have to discard it. How much do you think your flight ticket is going to be? It's probably going to be $1 million or $500,000 for a flight ticket. No one is going to be able to do that kind of cross-continental travel if it's that expensive. That's the kind of challenge we are facing for things like space travel. Going to a different planet is too expensive today. So sometimes when we look at innovation, it might not be something so glamorous. It might be doing the same thing that we're already doing, but making it faster, cheaper, more efficient. So to me, an innovation that has really inspired is a company like Spacex by Elon Musk. So today, like just 6 hours ago, they managed to catch a really large piece of equipment in the sea near Florida. So it's a $6 million piece of equipment that just came off from a spacecraft. So they basically put a huge net on a boat and basically try to catch that. So basically every rocket launch is going to become $6 million cheaper. And it might not really sound glamorous to you that someone is looking for rubbish in the sea with a boat and a net. But sometimes that's what innovation is. You are just making something that's existing process and making it better over time and improving human lives.
Thank you. So, with your reference to SpaceX and Elon Musk, Jerome, given everything that they've said so far, do you think there's still room for disruption in the travel industry to serve travelers better?
Yeah. I think I think there is. We are living in a period of time where there's never been so many opportunities than today. Maybe I quote someone. I don't remember who it was who said something like, "If your mind, let me recall this. If your mind doesn't get more and more confused, if you don't think that everything gets more and more complicated, it means that you don't understand what's going on." So, I mean, it's a bit tricky to understand, but what it means that everything becomes more complex, right? Think about how complex it is to run an airline. It's crazy. I mean, I just realized operations, engineering. Of course, we have partners and they help us, doing so. But think about now serving customers, right? And we have like all these opportunities reaching out directly to customers. And one of the latest potential disruption coming, to my opinion, is messaging platforms. Will we still have websites and mobile apps in 5 years from now? Honestly, I won't bet on that. I don't know. Looking at my kids and the way they consume internet today, they use their social network and they use their messaging platform all day through, right? And I think last month I've asked my daughter to send me a picture, to find out a picture in our mobile, because I remember she took a picture. And surprisingly, she used her messaging app, I think it was WhatsApp, to find the picture. And I was like, wait a minute, what did you just do now? And for her, it was very natural. My son is playing games like most of the kids today, right? And he's using his messaging app to use the game, to play the game. Because, of course, this thing is communicating with his friends, etc. So think about messaging platform as taking increasing place in our life and becoming the natural way we interact with our mobile phone. What if in 5 years, I don't know, we don't have a crystal ball, but what if in a few years from now, pretty much everything we do is going to happen through a messaging platform? This is a brutal change, right? And I think while we keep on developing websites and while we keep on developing mobile apps, we're doing the wrong thing. We should be developing a way to interact, in a more accurate way and dynamic way with our customers through what they use and not through what we believe is better. Right? So that's just an example, I think, just flagging it out. I don't know what you think, you might disagree. But I think that's the kind of thing which keeps me awake at night. We never know when things are going to happen and how they're going to happen. But believing that the way we do business today is going to be the same we do business in 5 years This I know is wrong.
So I have an alternative perspective when it comes to that, maybe complementary because it is about connectivity and bringing people together. There is the hype around virtual technology, right? Virtual reality. So people could, in theory, be somewhere where they don't have to travel. So airlines might be in trouble. But
that's not good for our business.
yeah. But it is complementary as well because there are limitations with time, resources, accessibility. So where do you see this connectivity going for Singapore Airlines?
Well, no, I think you're right. I think there is a need for, maybe I'm a bit old school, but to me, nothing replaces face-to-face, right? In some instances, you just cannot replace face-to-face with virtual reality, right? You need the chemistry. You need, thinking about Singapore Airlines, what makes Singapore Airlines unique, right, as a company? Okay, I tell you a little story. I've lost my spectacles in the plane when I flew back to Singapore last night, and it fell down behind the seat, right? And those business class seats are like very big. And I couldn't reach, I couldn't get my spectacles back. So I had to call the crews. And there was no way they could get the spectacles out of this seat, right? They worked on that for half an hour, 3 of them. They built ustensiles or whatever, right? And I told them like many times, guys, stop, it's okay. I can live without my glasses for, some time. And they wouldn't give up. They managed to get the spectacles out. So when I'm looking at this, I think, wow, that's what makes an airline different, right? This is all about our people. The extra care, the human touch, right? This thing that you will never get from a VR or an AR set, right? And I should not be saying this because I'm the innovation guy here, right? But what I'm trying to say here is that I think that, yes, there is opportunities there, but it's going to be complementary. It's not going to replace the need for human exchange and human interaction.
I think if we are just focused on whether there is a need, whether there is a problem statement to be solved, then I think we stay focused on like Singapore Airlines. What are your problem statements? As startup, are able to access that and understand that and focus their attention on working with those. That's why I thought your open innovation platform was something very valuable for the Singapore ecosystem, and this is something that the EDB is very seized with, actually working with large corporates with problem statements, particularly in the airline industry and the travel industry, as I talk about Changi Airport Group. In fact, just a few years ago, we started a 5-year program with them that puts out a $50 million grant call, actually, to the industry, focusing on problem statements in the travel tech industry. Because actually, how do we define travel tech, right? So it can anything from booking and planning to your actual travel experience in the airport, and also when you arrive from the Singapore Tourism Board experiences to your retail, your attractions. How do you enhance that whole experience that is brought to a traveler? So actually, where are the problem statements that today it resides that could help, I guess, interact and co-innovate with the startup ecosystem to make more meaningful products and services for travelers like us. So I think that is we at the EDB hopes to do more of that, because you have a burgeoning startup ecosystem in Singapore. Yes, they will work on problem statements, but also there is also large corporates actually seeking to innovate very differently, and there's a big desire we see on both sides wanting to co-create value together. So actually, I thought the panel here is very interesting because actually we can bring perspectives on, say, how do we make that partnership a very meaningful one.
I can add an experience that we went through as a startup in that kind of program. So in 2014, when we started, we were not really sure what we were trying to do was even legal, because the law says that you got to show a photo ID before you can check into a hotel. But we're trying to automate that process digitally. So very fortunately for us, there was a customer that managed to get the support from Singapore Tourism Board to improve the operations using this grant called Business Improvement Fund. So one of our first paying hotel customer globally received this grant from the government to make this technology very affordable. And technology at the first few phases are usually very expensive because we put in a lot of research. So from there, we get the initial traction. In 2018, there was a problem statement study between the hotels, STB, and it was a call for startups to come in. So we became an awardee for an innovation challenge to speed up the hotel check-in process. So I think that being startups, we are by nature challenging the status quo. So, and a lot of the laws and regulations may or may not be updated enough to accept that kind of challenge. So government's role is very important for a startup, essential even, to make sure that these startups can have a dialogue with the government and the stakeholders, and number two, have that very early stage boost to get the initial traction. Now that we've grown regionally, of course, we no longer get that kind of grant in other markets, like let's say Macau or Hong Kong, but we've already got past that initial hurdles.
Yeah, maybe the horsepower we have like out there in the market with startups is a million times, I don't know, multiple million times the horsepower we have in indoor, right? So we have to make sure we mobilize this. There is always someone trying to solve a problem that we don't already have, that we'll have maybe in a few months or years. The problem is how. The problem is how do we engage with startups? Because coming from the startup world and working now for corporate organization, I can see both worlds, and there is a huge gap here. Just think about time. The time perception is totally different. When you're a startup, a month is midterm. In a corporate organization, a month is short term. You know? If I get back to a startup in a month, in a few weeks' time, I think I'm going super fast. For the startup, this is eternity. This is what the hell are you doing, right? So we have to find a model by which we can operate with agility and be very reactive in the way we work with startups. So we have to protect them from a lot of bureaucracy and things we do usually. And it's important we do it because we have to make sure we run our business in a very safe way, and our planes, we operate our business with safety first. So there is a little bit of an antagonism here that we have to resolve, right? So the way we do it, and I'm not saying that's the way every company should do. I mean, it ends up working really well for Singapore Airlines. I mean, every company has to find its own way, I guess, right? But the way we do it when we engage with startup is a bit, I use an image. Okay, it might not be very elegant, but at least everybody can understand the image, right? So we use it, think about the dating process, right? And I'm not talking about the Tinder dating thing, right? That's not, I'm talking about the old school dating, right? You get to know each other, you go on a romantic date, it's fun, it's, movie theater, whatever it is, it's great, right? It's always great. So that's the way we start, looking at chemistry. Is there a chemistry there, right? That's important, right? Because again, it's all about people working with people, right? If there is no chemistry, it doesn't go anywhere, anyway. So, but it's not enough, right? So that's not helping building a couple. Then we have a further step. So the dating thing is, the romance thing is the app challenge. That's the first engagement, right? Then we have the acceleration program. Acceleration program is a bit like, okay, let's move together in an apartment. Let's see if we can live together, right? That's a bit like, okay, who's gonna take the trash out? You have the flip side of the living together, which pops up, right? So less the romance, more the pragmatism, right? So, and if it works well, because it's a longer engagement, we get to know each other. We get to know a little bit more about each other. We start having like disagreements. We start having a little bit of controversy at some point. That's the acceleration program. If this goes well, then there's a high chance that we can go further and maybe get married together, right? That's the ultimate stage. That's maybe investing. That's what we call the incubation stage. So sorry for the image, if it's not, but I'm French, so I cannot stop myself from using this kind of image. But the idea is really that by going through this process, right, and it has to take time. We cannot like get married like, hey, after the first date, right? That's something what corporate venture do, which is wrong. They tend to invest in companies because they have a funky technology, and they believe that's going to be rock. And the thing is, there's no chemistry. It doesn't match. So we want to make sure that all business people, all people feel comfortable working with startups. And it takes time. we have to be very rigorous in the way we do it, right? So that's a little bit the way what I can share here to make it a little bit.
I think the point about chemistry is really very true.
Yes.
When it comes to working with startups, working with corporate partners, working with investors, because at the end of the day, you're not just a company, a faceless company, right? You are dealing with people one-on-one, and building that trust is really important because when the going gets tough, right? You want people who would have your backs and ride it out with you. When it comes to the startup motivation, I always come with this assumption that people are fundamentally smart. Right? They will not spend their lives and all the time and all the effort doing something they don't believe in. So if they are committed to doing something, to accomplish something, there must be a reason behind it. And it's about testing to see if it is a true cause to continue to work for. Otherwise, they don't last. That's why startups that don't survive give up, right? Because they factor in the new information and they realize, oh, actually, it's not as perfect as I imagined it to be at the start. And that's part of the learning process as well. And it really adds a lot of value to pave the way for future startups as well.
Speaking of chemistry, don't we think that the chemistry amongst the panelists is fantastic today? I have the easiest job on stage today, I think. But going back to corporates and startups working together, Kui-Eng, I wanted to ask you, what are some positive examples you've seen of this happening, and why is Singapore such a good hub for this?
Yeah, so I have to say that SIA is, because we have partnered them to form this, but actually, compared to, let's say, 5 years ago when or more than that, when I meet a multinational, they come up to me and say, how do I be attractive to a startup? So I was quite shocked to hear that because, you are huge and mighty, you're in the billions, why are you saying that? So I think then they were figuring out, a lot of them were figuring out, but if you look at what it's today in Singapore, actually it's already very sophisticated. You have outside-in models, so you could talk about CVCs, you could talk about how they have open innovation models like CAG I talk about. In fact, they put out essentially, they are quite clear on the areas of technologies that they are hoping to procure in the areas of data analytics, smart infrastructure, non-intrusive security, as well as robotics. So for each of the corporates that we work with, we hope to build an engine that is anchored around Singapore so that they go on to work with a lot of the startups. So in that case, I think they had many fruitful products and services that result as a form of the partnership with the startups, including also predicting some of the flight schedules, how to get that right. So I think SIA, Changi Airport Group are examples. We have also seen other areas where, look at a typical company like Procter & Gamble. Actually, they have a inside-out model, looking at how they support their entrepreneurs, which I think some of which SIA is doing. Because actually entrepreneurs, intrapreneurs, actually corporates, the executives within the company understand the problem statements best. And how do they support them to go out there to start a company and in turn then provide the services back to the corporates. So the models are very sophisticated. We hope that Singapore, because of our concentration of the headquarters, can be a location for that to happen. And actually, at the end of the day, innovation is around, yes, there's chaos, but actually the key is how do you find a location that you can quickly learn and reduce friction in getting to where you want to get to, right? So we believe that Singapore offers that very compact ecosystem with a high density of the like-minded partners and capabilities in order for you to iterate quickly to bring to your destination. I think that's critical, as opposed to one in which, yes, you may find certain hotspots, but yeah. And the reason why I'm harping on corporate startup innovation, I think that's some of the discussion here. It's also because actually Singapore, we can't be like any other location. We're not Silicon Valley. We have a natural makeup of the corporate ecosystem already. So it's wonderful. We have this very strong energy around startups in the last 10 years. But we have a corporate ecosystem. In fact, if you look at Aon study, 40% of the headquarter employees are concentrated in Asia Pac, is concentrated in Singapore. So what does that mean for actually some of these things to happen? And you've already seen actually why companies are citing some of their operations here to make that happen. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On that note, actually, I was about to ask you a question, Cindy. We've touched on a lot of examples of good working relationships between corporates and startups. So, Cindy, are you worried that this will remove the need for funding from VCs and other types of investors?
Oh yeah, I'm going to lose my jobs. No, I don't think that will ever happen. I think when it comes to facilitating the connection between corporates and startups, there needs to be many, many such connections. Because you, as a startup, if you're only tied to one corporate, one customer, you have revenue concentration risk, right? So you don't want that. And if you're a corporate, you don't want to just tie yourself to just one tech provider, for instance. So it is an entire ecosystem that we have to bring together, and there is a time for everyone to fit into the entire process. Yeah. For example, we have startups, investors in startups, but they're not directly in the travel space, and we have linked them up with corporates, banks, so that they become customers or co-development partners for technology, Google, for instance. So it is a very healthy ecosystem we have here in Singapore.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that. Very much agree with everything you said. I don't really look like a Singaporean, do I? Right? So when it happens, when I'm speaking, I was in the Silicon Valley 2 weeks ago, and I presented what we're doing the same way I did just now. There is something I try to explain, which is very difficult for people to apprehend, which is cultural difference. We talk about cultural difference, but actually when you live it, really. So let me give an example of what I have in mind, and it will bring me back to corporate and startup. Singapore has the Singapore culture, and the Singapore airline culture is about you commit to what you say. You stick to your word. This is a deep down grounded value in the nation, in the culture, right? So whatever you say is very important, and you're gonna make sure you're ready to commit to it. I used to work for a US company, which I won't name here, but and I'm not criticizing, right? It's just like the way it is, where it's completely different, right? Where you go in a room and you're like, hey, yeah, this is great, let's do this, let's do that. And nothing really goes through, right? So sorry for simplifying a little bit, but what I'm trying to say here is that it's very difficult for Singaporeans or Singapore airline people to connect with people when they don't share the same values, which is commitment is very important, right? So you need to adjust, and you need to find your way of dealing with that difference. This being just one example out of many others, right? So now another thing when it comes to collaborating with startups, there's something I realized when I joined Singapore Airlines is that the brand is very attractive. I mean, everywhere in the world. I mean, people come to us. They want to sign with us because we have the brand we have, right? And they want us in their reference list, right? But one thing I realized is many startups, and I don't know whether they learned this or whether they've been conditioned to do it that way, and maybe I ask my colleague VC, but when they come and they pitch us, it's all about me, myself, and I. How great my technology is, how great my board is, and you can have this super huge, famous board member in my company, and I have the best investor in the world, and this. We don't care, right? As a company, we don't care. What we care about is how do you solve our problems, right? And I remember a month ago, a startup coming in, and they pitched, they came and they presented what they could do for us. Not a single time did I even mention their name. And I found it remarkable because at the end of the meeting, I asked the guy, I said, you didn't even mention the name of your company. He said, but we are here because you asked us to come here, so I guess we don't have to talk about that, right? And they focused their meeting on talking about how they can solve our problem. And that's my recommendation for startups is really, guys, think about when you're gonna talk to a corporate organizations. Instead of, being egocentric and self-centric, talk about how you can help us getting through our problems, right? And I couldn't insist more on that, because when a startup truly does that, I promise you one thing: we listen to them, and we're gonna move a step further because it shows something. It shows that they are really ready to commit. And again, commitment is what we're looking for most. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it really works if the corporates are open to sharing problem statements,
Yes,
right?
of course.
If it is a case of, yeah, we are so powerful and we are not going to have any problems at all, so trying to do research from the outside in is not going to be easy. But I definitely recommend starting with one foot on the ground, figuring out what is the real need to fill before designing your product around it, and not be too enamored by the whole hype about the technology or the number of zeros you're going to raise and all that.
I think a lot of the conditioning is the kind of pitch deck that we normally send to investors, which is a lot about who we are, because a lot of the time investors are backing an entrepreneur rather than the current product they have, because they're going to add more products along the line. But one of the experience that we felt was relevant when we work with the corporate customers is that you might think that since we sell to five-star hotels, all five-star hotels are the same. They are not. And in fact, even different properties under the same brand in a hotel group, they operate very differently. So we have two decks. We try to have two decks. So to the investors, we send the investment deck. But to the corporate customers, we don't really talk about our new expansion plans. We don't really talk about our hiring plans or how much we're raising, how we're going to spend our R&D and stuff like that. We really start off with what is your problem that keep you awake at night, and see how we can solve that together. And hopefully other airlines or other hotels are facing the same kind of problems so that we can scale it to more market sizes. Because the investors are going to ask, why are you wasting your 1 year with this corporate getting this small revenue? Because a year for a startup is eternity. We can live or die within that 1 year, but and especially for growth stage startups who are spending some kind of burn rate to grow. But to the corporate, 1 year is just nice to get all the buy-ins from different departments, different stakeholders. So I sometimes find that the biggest challenge when we work with the corporates is the sales cycle. We seem to exist in a two different time scale. We operate quarterly or weekly, daily, but the corporates are looking at years, decades of decision making. So I think that's where we got to try to manage the differences.
Well, we're getting better at that. I mean, a year ago, 2 years ago, when a startup was willing to work with Singapore Airlines, they would have to face a procurement process, right? A month of procurement process. Today it's different. Today we have a team in charge of removing this, making sure we move with speed, agility. Or talk startups in the room. I don't know if we have startups in the room. We have App Challenge, right? We're running this. Go on the website. We have we publish our problem statements. My team even did videos. This is a beautiful way to engaging with Singapore Airlines. You can come to my team. My team is in blue there. I see them. Raise your hands, guys. You can come to them. They will be there for you. They will listen to you. But again, make sure you understand what we're trying to solve before you come and talk to us, right? Every day, I get at least 3 to 5 decks. We mentioned that, we talked about that. I mean, like the typical startup investment deck, right? What do we want me to do with that, right? I have a wonderful AI technology, it's the best in the world. Okay, fine. So what, right? So, sorry to insist a bit on that. It's very important to have mutual empathy. Because if I care for you and you care for me, there is a way of doing things together. If you only see me as big pockets, and a big name that I can add on my reference list, that's not gonna work.
Thank you, Jerome. And to wrap up, I'd like to end with a fun, lighthearted Back to the Future question for everyone on the panel. What do you think the future holds for travel tech, either here in Singapore, in the region, or globally?
You want to take this one?
Okay. I think, well, two words come to my mind. So if I'm a traveler, I'm looking for either convenience, efficiency, or experience, right? So I mean, I just think of it simply. An experience, I mean, those are the frills and all that. So I can find that at a cost. So I don't really care. But if down to efficiency and all that, I'm quite down to earth. I'm a business traveler. So I wish that we will have a very frictionless security check. Even the world gets more complex. So at the airport.
Well, I think the future of travel definitely has to become a point where we can travel further, faster, at a more affordable prices, in a more secure way, and in a more frictionless way, maybe more digital, less physical belongings, physical identities, and it's already happening slowly.
From the VC perspective, I believe that the travel space will continue to be supported because if you need to be somewhere, you need to be somewhere. So demand is inelastic. It's seasonal, yes, but the trend I see is actually more and more people will be traveling earlier in their lives and traveling longer till they're much older than we can imagine now. Right? So the environment has to change and evolve to accommodate that.
Okay, I think we're always going to have travel providers for travel content, travel services providers, and we're always going to have travelers. But what's going to happen in the middle, I really don't know. That's going to be very, very difficult to predict. I think that, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but I think that those messaging platforms will have an increasing place in the way travel gets consumed and distributed and the way people interact. I just look at the kids, right, today. This will take more and more place. So I think that the world we're looking at today, like websites and mobile apps, will not disappear, of course, but might become less of an importance for travel providers like us. We'll have other partners, new partners in the future, and that's great. We want new partners helping us serving our customers better because we cannot do everything. So I think I'm pretty optimistic and pretty, when I'm looking at the future, at least for the next 5 years. Beyond 5 years, it starts becoming like prediction, crystal ball, and I won't get there, yeah.
So everyone in the audience, from startups to travel companies to regulatory bodies, take note. Frictionless and seamless seems to be the key takeaway here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.